Welcome, welcome everyone. Welcome to the first episode of the ACCPA video podcast. ACCPA, the Alberta Community Crime Prevention Association, is the connector between rural, urban, Indigenous and Métis communities and agencies. And we believe that we can build safer communities and well-being when we all work together. And that is why we foster relationships with partner organizations. Our awareness topic today is human trafficking, understanding realities and what can happen online and how to safeguard our children. Today we are super excited to have Kelly Tallon Franklin on our video broadcast. Hi, Kelly. And we also have our chair, Jean Botha of ACCPA. Hi, Jean.
Hi.
And I'm Kirsten, and I am your host with ACCPA today. Kelly, we are awesome. We are so excited to have you here today because this topic is so important. And for everyone who has not heard about Kelly, Kelly Franklin is the founder and chief executive director of Courage for Freedom, a Canadian leading organization who exists to educate, train, and certify frontline and community service providers on proven strategies and prevention tactics to serve vulnerable victims of human trafficking and sexual exploitation. Oh my goodness. Kelly, you know what? I will just leave it up to you to say a few words to our listeners today, to introduce yourself. And then let's get started about this very important topic.
Well, first, I'm excited to be here, but secondly, I'm excited for the work that you're doing and what you represent in your community as education, awareness. And then I know, after having spent some time talking to you both, that you're all about action. So the excitement today is from myself, first of all, as a survivor of human trafficking. I'm old as dirt, so when dinosaurs roam the earth. But what's really important is that I endeavor to carry the voice of minor age victim survivors, of which I've worked with over 367 and their families all across Canada, majority in Ontario. But as you have heard and learned researching this, traffickers move them all across the nation. So I am excited to be here. There's no question, we should leave no stone unturned today, and we will endeavor for your audience to be a to-be continued conversation and give them connection information when we're through. And first, I also want to say to survivors through your province and community, and for those doing this work, thank you, because we are an and also kind of crew. It's not either or work. It's only and also when we network together, all industries, all sectors, all ages, all demographic, all ethnicities, that we're going to move the dial.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this is so, you are so on point with this, Kelly. And this is, I think, why ACCPA is so excited to have you here, because this is really one of our strengths, because we are the connector between agencies, because we have noticed that there is information out there, but people just don't know how to access this. Mm-hmm. So let's just get to our first question. Kelly, can you explain what is human trafficking?
So there are legal and then kind of social definitions. So I'm actually going to read to give you a legal definition so I don't misstep. And I'll apologize to your viewers in advance. I do have PTSD-induced trauma as a survivor, but my brain will function and we'll get to where we need to land. Yep. So human trafficking by definition is a form of modern day slavery. And it's where victims are treated as possessions that can be bought and sold. Victims, and I think it's important to hear the language in the definition. They can be any age, gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, religion, socioeconomic status, from any geographic location, rural or city, big or small. And it's become one of the most complex crimes and issues that involves three things. So these three things are what make it human trafficking, and that is coercion, manipulation, and exploitation. And what's especially egregious, it usually happens to those that are most vulnerable in society. It does include some specifics that we need to think about. So whenever you watch or see anything or read anything in the news and you see human trafficking or sex trafficking or sex trade, not sex work, but sex trade, because there's a commodification. When you see the word sexual exploitation, your bells should go off in your head that there is a minor age person engaged. And specific to that definition, it's sexual abuse of a minor, and it involves their manipulation. And I think it's really important that as adults we understand this piece. It can be for exchange for a sexual act, for money. We all know that one. For drugs, shelter, food, transportation, love and acceptance or other considerations. So it's not just about having sex for money. That really changes our mindset when we think about child protection and prevention. How many young people have had a fight with an adult and go couch surfing and are forced to sleep with somebody as a commodity to pay for that bed space? When we start having conversations like that and thinking about the precursors to place our kids at risk, to be lured and groomed by a higher end trafficker and not, a bottom end commodifier for a couch, we really start to understand the issue of safeguarding our kids.
Wow.
Sorry, that's a lot.
Yeah. It's not an easy, like a short question is not, doesn't always come with a short answer.
No.
So, Kelly, I have a question. I mean, we are in Canada. Is this not really, like, is this really real here for us? Like, is that not something that is more, you're laughing, but so is it really a topic that is happening like here in Canada?
So this is a question I hear repeatedly, and I want us to think about something. Just because we don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. Just because we don't see wind doesn't mean we don't experience the effects of it pushing things around. So we have to understand that although we might not be engaged or entrenched in behaviors that include, sex trade and purchasing people as commodities or online egregious child rape video viewing, it doesn't mean that our neighbors next door aren't. It is that deep, dark, privatized thing now where we're not necessarily seeing somebody walking down the street like back in the day for me with red lipstick and fishnet stockings. Our media channels have taken that into a darker place, and so it's out of sight, out of mind. But I'm here to tell you it's real. It's underreported. It is the second highest grossing criminal activity in Canada. A year and a half ago, it moved from number 3 to number 2. We're going the wrong way. And so when we understand it, that it's not just an immigrant issue, it's not a shipping container issue, although that can happen. It's very rare. I think it's less than 5% of any of the trafficking is outside of Canadian nationals. It's over 95% of all trafficking are actually Canadians. And it can happen, like I said, in any demographic, any community, for a myriad of reasons. It's such a complex issue. And that's why it's hard to get our head around it. So I want to encourage anybody listening today, don't feel lost, because I don't know if you're on page 1 and you want to know about this issue, or you're sitting like me and you're on page 250 and writing the next chapters in activism. Everybody in this mix will hear something today that will give you a call to 5 minutes of actions that can do something for your community. And the most vulnerable, like, you're going to ask about stats. So I'll just say it is here. It is real. It is making people up to $250,000 tax-free per person that they're commodifying. And so it's about supply chain, supply and demand. when we get back to thinking about that, before I'm gone today, we really need to talk about who's buying our children.
Who is our children?
Poor Kirsten, I just thrown her for a loop.
I know. Yeah.
So like how is this happening, Kelly? Like you just said, like I could have now so many more questions and we have already written down. So who is buying our children?
Well, the statistics show us that in Canada, 60% of those buying are Caucasian male. They are college, university educated entrepreneurs or landowners, farmers. They have a low median income of $75K and are married or grandparents. So when we think about those demographics, does it not flip our brain off the highly racialized, oppressed images of pimps? And does not that bear the question for us to start asking, who's buying our children? Who is purchasing and raping our children? And how do we engage men allies in the conversation to hold one another accountable? Because the majority of buyers are men.
So Kirsten, I have a question. So Kelly, prior to the federal election, there were some child protection bills that were to be ratified, whatever. So where are we at with that? Who's advocating? Who can we join forces with? That kind of stuff. This stuff makes me sick to my stomach. And like you said, it's not just urban, because I hear this a lot. People think it's just something that happens in the cities. So what's going on with those child protection bills?
So first of all, I'm going to speak to anybody that thinks you're immune from this. The pimps win. You are giving them permission to come into your communities and access your most vulnerable children and youth. Ignorance is a trafficker's and a buyer's best friend. They love it when we're sitting in a river called denial. So we were really fortunate in Canada. There's an all political party group on the Hill in Ottawa. And with apolitical will, they just work together on things that are impacting our safety, through public safety, the Minister of Public Safety, Bill Blair's office, and his work on human trafficking, and then the Canadian Centre to End Human Trafficking, and then the concern of us as constituents. So let me tell you something. Your politicians are there to serve you as constituents. So instead of calling them up and complaining, if you find out what they're currently working on and can help them with petitions, that actually gives them permission to speak both on the Hill and in the Senate. And if you want information about how to do this and how to link forces with the myriad of organizations that we have the good privilege to work both with and internally with and align them together for that, when you have group power, you change the political landscape. So a very informed and compassionate Senator, Julie Meville-Duchamp, she presented things to our Senate and was moving along through the Senate at providing a bill that was protection for children from and restricted access to online pornographic sites. This also coincided at the time with the inquiry about MindGeek and Pornhub, in which there were calls to action because there were videos that were actually rape videos that victim survivors were unable to access and pull down, and somebody was monetizing. I think currently a couple of those owners were actually listed on that horrible list that just came out about foreign investment to hide things. So there's all these balls in the air. But the easiest thing to say, if we need to work locally, we need to understand what's happening in our community, and as the adults take our civic duty seriously and find out what we can do just in our everyday life. And then if we want to work on the macro, we have to change some of the systems. So this isn't a hole in the bucket that's getting bigger and our kids are falling through.
Yeah.
We need to leave that generationally. We need to leave and eradicate challenge with people to end the buying and selling of our kids. So legislation's important if that's your thing. If you're a research nerd and you want to help do research and create papers and briefs to write stuff, if you have other organizations or other gift, skills, or talents, we have a Canadian task force that's very organic. We work on 2 projects a year, so you can stay where you are, stay with ACCPA, stay engaged there, but coexist with us on February 22nd, the National Day of Anti-Human Trafficking in Canada. That's a report card day to ask your parliamentarian questions. If you want to know what to ask, write us. We can help you write the script, know the laws, how that works. But now, you know, when an election's called, and I'm not politicizing this, all those bills that were put forward and motioned and passed and almost through, they have to start all over again.
Oh dear.
So we are starting. Well, the good news is we're starting.
Yeah, we are.
We're going to do it. And I know your listeners will find it easy to get engaged and send an email.
Yeah.
That's all it's going to take.
Yeah. Well, and you're right. I mean, we want to stay in our own lane. And I agree. Collective action is very powerful, but everybody has their place in that little stream, right? So and I agree about starting local, Alberta. Hey, here we are. We're in Alberta. Let's start here. And let's make, I believe there has to be awareness out there. Even myself, I'm involved with not just this organization, but a lot of different crime groups throughout the province, a lot of them rural. So we need to start talking about this. And not just talking, there has to be action. I get tired of the talk. It has to, we have to pick it up, right? You know? Yeah.
And if we don't give people actionables that are doable and easy peasy and allow them the space to do the other things that matter to them, because this might be one of a myriad of causes that's in their heart.
That's right.
So Courage for Freedom and our Canadian Task Force have tried to make that simple with Project Maple Leaf and other projects that we work on collaboratively. But I can tell you that if we are only spreading awareness, it almost gets competitive, like which is the next Netflix episode. And that creates fear mongering and it exhausts people. And the vicarious trauma we cause the community does not lend them to have hope. And so that's what we want to message. There is hope. There are things that are moving. Ontario has probably the most robust strategy of any province that's now funding their strategies and gone into all sectors after this. And they're leading in a way, but they should be leading because 60% of all human trafficking is reported to start in this province of Ontario, where I sit. But there's reasons. And so the legislation is important. So we found in Ontario that one of the reason there was more young people being trafficked out of our province than anywhere else collectively, the numbers. And of course, Nova Scotia has the highest rate per capita.
Oh, wow.
And there's generational trafficking from there. That if we look at the cause of why that's a statistic, that's more important than just spouting off a stat. Well, our Child and Youth Act had some gaps in prevention, that at 16, 17, and 18, there was emancipation. And unless the police could get a full disclosure, they couldn't protect those young people, even though in their face, they were seeing the traffickers, seeing the indicators. So that change to that Child and Youth Amendment, our AG worked across the floor with all parties and put a motion forward February 22nd to amend it to give police, child protection agencies, and even go into hotel motels where they believe there's minors and demand an immediate information for rosters.
Yeah.
And I know people challenge that, but at the end of the day, these are children.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this motion moved, forwarded, passed by, I believe, June 1st was the announcement. How does that happen? And so I challenge Alberta.
Yeah.
I'm challenging you to understand, and I can send you a list of agency partners and people we work with that we've worked with both nationally and locally, including RCMP, police, Crime Stoppers, your Indigenous-led organizations, communities, organizations like CEASE that have, under Kate Quinn's leadership, have been there forever,
Yeah.
you know, doing the work. And what I can say is that those that not only consult with survivors, because it's almost tokenizing,
Yeah.
but those that actually have survivors in roles of leadership as the leads on issues and projects and information. First, they do a service to our community where we're listening to survivors, because they have the outlying information that will give us the prevention for tomorrow.
Right. Right.
But also, when it's survivor-led, it's not a myth. It's not a shipping container. It's not a Liam Neeson movie. By the way, only 1% of all those trafficked are snatch and grab.
Oh, wow.
And usually it's somebody that had a pre-existing relationship with the trafficker.
Right. Right.
It's not Prince Andrew. He doesn't live in Canada, and neither does Epstein or Weinstein. But Nygaard did. And actually, I interviewed last week for CBC on this very issue. Because if we look at the definitions of those that are trafficking, he would be known as a CEO pimp.
Oh,
It's a
my.
business pimp. So that's where, if anybody's watching, if I'm filling your head, we will give you education that will blow your mind and then pick you back up and put you on a trajectory in your own community so you can pick a lane and drive in it together.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what we'll be looking for, is those references and names and whatever. Let's get involved.
And it's not just about us, Jean, because I only come to Calgary twice a year.
Yeah.
And I go through communities and I train with horses out there because I use horses to heal trauma. Right. And then, you know, I go north, south, east, and west, and I listen. I listen in Indigenous communities, in community, Punjabi and Sikh communities, language communities, because there's higher risk in communities that have less support.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
So Kelly, I have a question. Like you talked, like you said, like children. So how old are those children? Like, is there a typical age? And also, so I have like two girls, 11 and 14, and I would like to know, like, how can our children recognize possible dangerous situation, and how can I, as a parent, help them?
So first of all, I want to say that we have to remove the responsibility for child protection off our children. We failed in the past because we're expecting our kids to keep themselves safe from professional criminals, silly adults. So we also have to remember the physiology of a child or a youth. And our stats show us that trafficking, 68 to 72%, depending on whose stats you use, are 24 and under, the bulk of which are 18 and under minors. I use the 24-year age, though, because if you look at physiology, we know that youth and young adults' brains are not fully formed. The neural pathways are not complete till 24, about 24 for girls, 26 for boys. And if we understand that the frontal lobe, that's the risk assessment center. And the gas and the brakes and the decision-making are the cerebral cortex in the back. The wiring from the front to the back is what's not fully formed. So we're asking kids and youth and young adults to assess risk without the capacity to do it fully. So I charge adults, before it gets dangerous, let's start educating. Let's talk about consent. Let's start in grade 1, grade 2. Let's start when they're 3 and 4 by giving them proper names for body parts and helping them understand, even if somebody touches them physically and they enjoy it, but it's not appropriate, that it's okay to say it's not appropriate, even though your body's saying it's good. And that's because our bodies are made with all these nerve endings. So when you touch somebody, even though it might be a bad touch, there might be a nerve ending that's sending a message to the brain. And that is one of the reasons it's so confusing for young people. You know, how many of us were teen girls and we always listened, right? Everything our parents said, we did, right?
Yeah.
We were always home on curfew. We didn't smoke cigarettes and try some alcohol or drive the car when we should. Okay. So now you understand why this is actually an adult civic duty. And so, although I agree that providing information for young people, scaring the bejesus out of them is not going to activate them to become empowered, enlightened, proactive, where this movement to protect their friends, most of them are never going to cognitively be able to respond to themselves with the internal mechanisms they have, the cognitive behavioral development. If they've had any trauma, it impairs it even further. So why aren't we assisting kids from a young age to learn that they can use their voice for the benefit of others? And then, you know, how many of us have ever gone on a diet? Okay, you don't have to put up your hands. I can probably just hear all the hands going up on the live, right? How many of us have actually lost weight, but it took a friend to notice the change in us? There it is. So creating little people that speak up for siblings, that understand that friending up is their way of being grown up and having control and power. Give them that control and power to protect their friends. And let's come up with another word than protect. It's almost too justice driven, in not in a good way. It needs to be their words. They need to own it. And that's why I'm always asking the minors that I work with. I have 37 on my board right now that I'm engaged with and supporting, both with residential services and virtual services, in-person services, resources, money, whatever they need. They're the ones that tell me what works and what isn't working, you know. When we hear that, so get your kids talking, help them to role play a proactive role, anything appropriate, know their capacity. Don't vilify the phone. You will send it to a dark place and somebody will have access. Ask them what they think about what they're seeing. And I think I provided for you to share afterwards an app, actually a URL link for people to check apps and look at what the risks are in those apps. If you freak out about it, they will not talk to you. And the whole thing is keep your kids talking. You know, what we hear from Child Protective Services and child psychologists, CPRI, the Child's Psychiatric Resource Institute in Ontario, is that it only takes one secure attachment. So for some kids, it's their parent. For some, it's an aunt or uncle. For some, it's that counselor at school or their best friend's parent that is a safe person. So that's what's the most important. And then learn how and what you can do to take action and talk to them about what you're doing, not to scare them, but age appropriately. Ask them. I have a friend named Aishan Shah that actually runs a nonprofit in the UK that fights modern day slavery. He is 18 years old and he speaks at the United Nations and he's a glorious friend. And what he's done is gone back to talk to 8-year-olds in grade 3 or whatever they call it. And they call it level something in England. And ask them about supply chain and demand. And then he flips the conversation to say, so what if that supply chain was your friend? what would you be doing?
Mhm.
And listening to young people
Mhm.
is amazing.
Yes, it is.
Oh, yeah. I think, like as you
Good.
said, I think we need to speak in a language that they understand.
We need to
So
listen to them.
and listen, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but how can we, like, I mean, like with teenagers, and as we all know, they might not really listen always. So, is there, and our topic today also is what can happen online.
Yeah.
So what could happen online, like as a parent?
Oh, you don't
I
want to
mean,
know. Like watch Dr. Mehmet Oz and see what happened to Dr. Laura Berman's son, who went on Snapchat and ordered some casual drugs and OD'd from fentanyl. Like there is a myriad of things that can happen, that the internet is a gateway.
Mhm.
But you have to decide what your controls and your mechanisms are for social media. And I'm saying, it's not too late if your kids are teens, but inspiring them to start to mitigate their own risk and let them test drive little risks that aren't harmful. Like letting a child trip and then
Yeah.
you pick them up and put the Band-Aid on.
Yeah.
So start there. Just understand what some of the signs are. But more than signs, can I say this? It's behaviors, it's clusters. And that's why it can take parents up to 18 months to identify it's happening to their children.
so what are typical behaviors that we
So
should
there is a list that's so big. If I drop 4 here, I'm being irresponsible. I would say go to the Ontario Strategy in Anti-Human Trafficking and read their robust responses. There's actually a resource there called The Trap. It's a virtual cell phone that you can learn how to use and engage your kids in conversations to understand cognitively how somebody's baiting and switching their conversation, how somebody's tugging at those emotional teen crush heartstrings. And don't downplay that with your kids. Those feelings are real. Ask Amanda Todd's mom. She was coerced online and it cost her life because they wanted to shame her. You have to never shame your kids for what they're disclosing. Even if you're horrified,
Yeah.
put on your poker star face. Turn around. Do you remember when your kids were little and you had to go in the other room and laugh?
Yeah.
It's kind of like that, but you have to do it in real time.
Yeah.
And you should use open-ended questions with your kids. Like when they say something, don't jump in and tisk them or freak out or correct them in that moment that they're disclosing. If you use words like, they will keep sharing, or oh, and at the end of it, so what do you want me to know about that? And they might say nothing. And then you process it with your other adult allies, and you don't become oppositional to your kids in this, because that's what a trafficker will tell them that you will do. And most of those that are encouraging kids online, they will take up to 2 years to recruit, lure, and groom. And for anybody listening that wants to take training and what that looks like in real time, that is more responsible than telling you somebody might have a tattoo or a burn mark or an abuse brand or blah, blah, blah. Once we train you to not only understand what you're seeing, but the behavior behind it, then we'll stop using posters of girls with handcuffs and duct tape on their mouth. And I'm sorry, I'm speaking the female narrative because 96% of all the young people I've worked with are female or identify as feminine gender. And it's a higher rate. I also believe that boys, the disclosure rate is just lower because of an additional level of shame and lack of resources. So when you're talking to your kids, if you say to them, so what do you want me to know? Or you're just quiet, they will continue to fill the space. They'll tell you things that you cannot grip through fear, but find actionables that are age appropriate that you can give to them to test drive. They need to self-direct their safety as an adult going ahead. And if they miss a step and this happens, and they felt any level of shame from you, if anything happens, you will be the last person they will disclose to.
Yeah.
Because of shame.
Yeah. I totally. And just from having, my sons are older, quite older, a bit older now, but like taking the time to listen to them, really taking the time, taking all the stuff that's in your life and just putting it aside and sitting there and actively listening to what's going on. Yeah, I agree.
And
Kelly.
I want to encourage adults that if you haven't done that, don't go cray cray.
Yeah.
Do not unplug everything and change your whole house and
Yeah.
life and get rid of your screens, and all of a sudden you're out frolicking in the forest 5 days a week instead of being couch potatoes. Go slow.
Yeah.
Go slow, make changes that they'll embrace. Ask them for how they can support the change. What will they contribute to the family that they're part of valued? And you know what I'm saying too? We're a community. So if there are young people in your community and you know they don't have this, can you ally up and be that grown up to some of your kids' friends? Be that community person and help support other parents parenting. They might not have the resources, the means, the mental health capacity through COVID to even think about this.
That's true.
Kelly, you said lure and groom. Like what do you mean? Like, and I think that's a common term, but like, can you explain what that actually means?
So basically it's targeting. It's looking for vulnerabilities in our young people. It's as simple as just noticing something on social media that catches a targeter's, what we call a pimp or a madam or a manager, couples that are looking to pull somebody in to make money from them by commodifying them. They are looking for somebody's vulnerabilities, and then they start speaking a juxtaposed language that fuels that cerebral part and that emotional part of every young girl and boy, that they want to feel accepted, loved, validated, included, important, understood. Can you just remember this? I remember falling in love with Donny Osmond and Michael Jackson at the same time and thought that I'd marry them both. That love draw, we're test driving emotions. You think of the hormones, the testosterone and the estrogen that's just released, and what it does to their capacity to understand when somebody's duping them. I have had parents call me and had their kids that are 12 ready to steal a parent's credit card and fly across the country because they are certain they're in love. And even when you face facts, their brain is not able to process. That's a far gone experience where we intervene. And very often it is an intervention because the child is in full-blown mental trauma and can't go back to a place of mental sobriety to understand situationally that they're at risk because they are so hurt. When you're angry, salespeople say, offend somebody or make them angry or hurt, and you can negotiate because they can't think. And so that's what happens with our kids. If we're not saying to them, we're so sorry that you feel this way, but this is my job and I'm going to do my job. But I will listen to you. I will hear you. And you have permission to be honest with me. And so when it happens, sometimes it can take up to 18 episodes to assist to remove a young person. There's additional things that can happen to them that, because of their level of shame and their lack of capacity to deal with their situation and feeling isolated and consumed, it becomes obsessive and compulsive, that's all they do. And so when you're trying to remove them from this, it's very difficult and sometimes can take up to 18 attempts. They can rely on things like drugs and alcohol or addictive behaviors to manage their mental unrest with what's literally happening to them, and the lack of control. You know, the psychology behind the grooming, luring, and turning somebody out into this. It starts by building relational trust that actually, on the side of the trafficker, they couldn't care less. They love their money. That is all. And they have goals and languages and just things that they use that are mentally sound. And our kids almost don't stand a chance unless we give them the gift of interpretation. And it starts when they're little. If you haven't done it, start now. It's never too late. And also, let your kids catch you going through your phone. And if they say, "What are you doing?" "I'm removing people I don't know. Anybody that I can't do this with and shake a hand, I'm going to remove, because I don't want them in my bank account stealing our money we're saving for vacation." Lead by example, not by threat or fear. So they're targeting the vulnerabilities. They're looking for whatever their market will hold, that somebody will purchase. There's links between other crimes often, but they very often start with this stuff where they're Romeoing them. They're promising stardom or photos or videography or social media popularity or acceptance into gangs, or what, you know, you see kids using words yo fam. You see kids using words like wifey when they're talking to other girls. You know, there's grown women wearing that on a shirt, and people do not know that that word comes from gang activity of different women that have been trafficked. A wifey is another woman in the stable or the deep where they've been trafficked together. And now we're normalizing these words. So one of the important statistics that we have, and I think this was one of your questions, is where are we at statistically? Well, first, let me say it's the most underreported crime I've ever seen or will ever see in our lifetime, for a myriad of reasons. Re-victimization, our lack of capacity systemically to police this and prosecute it without reharming a victim psychologically. Our 2019 StatsCan report that came out showed a 43% increase in human trafficking reports.
We're 43, Kelly, is that right?
40% in 2019 increase. And it's underreported. Then we also know that one of the reasons it's underreported is because Crown attorneys and police services work together to assess the laying of the human trafficking charges under the laws of ACCPA. And those laws protect the victim and are supposed to charge the buyer and the trafficker. How often do you see the buyers being charged? Just a question. So one of the things I would say is, because decisions are made before they even get to court on whether they're laying the charges, and pleading out because it's a harder charge to convict on for a million reasons. Very often those charges are dropped or never laid, even though there's enough evidence provided or witness statements given, because they know they can prosecute a criminal on a different charge and it's going to get plea bargained anyways. I'm sorry, but I think we have a duty to victims and survivors that black ops data of how many times this is reported, whether it's laid, considered, or whatever happens, I think that data needs to be made available through the Canadian Centre to End Human Trafficking, their resources and reports, and Public Safety Canada through our federal ministry. I believe that kind of gray area of data should be expected from the ministries of justice and those working in our justice circles. Also, how many children's aid or child protective services workers have heard that young people are, but they're willing not to come forward? Where's that data going? Where's the responsibility provincially to throw that data back up and then federally collect it, it's going to help us to know where to put the money in our responses. And to help your folks that are listening to understand that this is just one of those areas that if we work together on it and figure out how to share the data and how to use it to change things for the future, to decrease that hole in the bucket, that we're win-win.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And I think this is also like at ACCPA, this is like something that we put on our flag very big. And so, Jean, do you have some further questions for Kelly? I'm saying like we are almost up with our time today, and we have heard so many important things from Kelly today. Is there anything else that you think we should include or ask Kelly for today?
I just had a question. And the agencies in Alberta, do they go into the schools and speak with the children, or what kind of work is done with that?
I can tell you that historically, there's people that's been their drive in the lane mandate. And so some school boards are open, some aren't, for reasons the staff, the counselors have to be available, trained, and engaged to respond. Should there be disclosures, the community supports have to be accessible. I'm going to give you my personal take on this after working across Canada with a myriad of people from all sectors, whether they're school board. Right now, I'm working with Thames Valley District School Board out of London, Ontario, to consult on what we believe needs to be included in a province-wide mandated educational component in prevention from grade 1 to grade 12 that also includes training for educators as part of their mandated contractual training. We have purported that it should be, there have been survivors and survivor-led agencies historically that have written this curriculum, that it has been available, but the doors haven't been opened because you know, teachers are expected to do so much already. And I'm sorry for adding this, but if we advocate to add it in Alberta, then you need to advocate for the money for your educational sector as well, provincially, and then push the feds to download. But here's our take. Age-appropriate curriculum that is around consent and not unhealthy, but healthy relationships is where this conversation starts and leads to age-appropriate, capacity interpreted, survivor-led curriculum that then a Board of Ed then takes and vets for their educational component, their MOL, their board educational standards. I really believe it needs to be created out of the survivor-led agencies. And if anybody is working with boards of ed and would like some of the curriculum that we are recommending across the province that is from allied agencies that have been doing this work with board of ed for years, we don't need to own it or reinvent the wheel. The survivors own the responses, people. We only get to work alongside of them.
Right.
And if we make it easy for the boards, and what I can say too, if your boards have a consistent baseline for this curriculum and this education, it's not just the police going into the school, because sometimes kids won't listen to justice circles, some will. It's not just survivors, it's a collaborative where, you know, all hands on deck. How many of you sat in your health class in grade 11 and zoned out to, you know, the Charlie Brown teacher? That's not how it needs to be.
That's
it
right.
Needs to be conversational. It needs to be a dialogue. It needs to be inspired, and it needs to allow students to self-direct how they're going to friend up and look after one another. And so I believe that the Board of Eds need to work collectively as a province on what the template needs to look like. So for us, it's Bill 251 and Program and Policy 166, and I can forward that to you as well. The problem is it's a scramble, and all boards are looking at this unilaterally. And, you know, traffickers love when we do that
Yeah.
because then they can go to communities where they see gaps educationally
Yeah.
and communities that aren't inspired in awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we'll go, they've got a weak policy. We're going there.
Yeah. Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So when we have a template about what should be included,
Yeah.
and that it's survivor led first with the community collaborators, and then it meets the template from the Ministry of Education in each province, and then the educational system vets it for educational compliance, content, and MOL, and all those educational
Yeah.
things that are way over here
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
We've actually helped create this, as have allies that we work with all across Canada.
Yeah.
So don't reinvent the wheel, but you
Yeah.
should be demanding that there is a provincial template,
Yeah. Yeah.
that there are certain guidelines and expectations, not just like I have it on my desk. I can read you what they put out and I'm like, well, that's vague.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But and the other thing is to go back and visit the bill, that it has to be revisited yearly, assessed.
Oh, good.
That everything that you put forward that has to do with anti-human trafficking and sexual exploitation, especially of our kids and youth, that there needs to be a hard stop evaluation line.
Yeah.
So we pick February 22nd, National Day.
Good.
That's the day we reevaluate all these things.
Yeah.
And then we talk to our allies, you know, Business and Professional Women Canada. I chair their ad hoc committee. So how do we inspire them to do the work they've done since the 50s?
Yeah.
In advocacy, the Canadian Council of Muslim Women, the National Jewish Women's Council, the National Association of Indigenous Women,
Right.
the Canadian Federation of University Women, Rotary International. We're working on their national strategy right now, and I'm consulting on it. If you want an amazing template to work on as coalitions in your community, that's for survivors and their families, go to the Toronto Police Services Human Trafficking page.
Okay.
There are 23 members in their Human Trafficking Policing Service. They are very forward thinking and are very robust in their survivor forward approach, although they have to be cops and do justice, right? But if you take that webpage, we consulted just to vet it at the end for youth survivor friendliness. And if you see the blanks that are there, survivors, their families, and anybody that wants to know about this can click on any question day or night. So every province, every community should have a page like this and insert your data. And if you want to do that, we have permission to use their template, and I will send that over.
Oh, wow. That's
wow.
Yeah, it is.
Awesome.
Are you getting tired?
You know what? I'm so glad that we found you, because like your knowledge and the resources that you have been sharing today are absolutely important, and we will make sure that we share this with our followers as well. And I would like to thank you, Kelly, for your time today. And Jean, like we are very excited and thankful that you had the time today. So for everyone else who would like to get in contact with you, is there anything, like we will share your social media handles and your website, of course. Is there anything coming up? Do you have a specific program training coming up that you want to share before we end this today?
If anybody wants to get in touch and find any of the resources we spoke about, or just have a dialogue, it's office@courageforfreedom.org. My cell to text me, I don't listen to voicemails, 519-870-2292. And coming up is both Project Interclusion, which is a multi-language, multi-religious, multi-ethnic, multi-community, pan-Canadian project. If you want to get involved, we need some interpreters still, and those that would like to carry this forward into the provincial legislature, into their immigrant and settlement centers, their Indigenous communities, to the chiefs, elders, grannies, and aunties, and mosques, grualis, faith-based places. When we get the information everywhere, we're going to see change. And then we have Project Maple Leaf that is recycling back up. And that's the most important thing you could do, is contact us and we will share this sign
Okay.
You can read it and make a statement. I want to end the buying and selling of girls and boys children in Canada. I add my voice, I share the sign, and I challenge 5 people as Canadians to take a stand to eradicate this.
Excellent. Excellent.
And then we will have trucks driving all across Canada from February 22nd, 2022 to
Okay.
July 30th. Every province, every territory, every community, and there'll be a message on the sign. It'll match our new signs, our new swags. The truck wraps will match. The highway signs will match with this one message that was inspired by a 16-year-old survivor.
Wow.
This message across Canada was inspired by a young girl that said, can you please ask Canadians to help stop this from happening to someone else?
Wow.
We need your help to message.
Yeah.
And we'll train you and give you what you need and become our ambassador. I'm just one.
Yeah.
We're not growing our organization. We're growing a movement of caring, compassionate, civic-minded Canadians. Please add yourself to our list.
Yeah. We're there.
Awesome.
Thank
We
you,
are there.
Kelly.
Thank you so much, Kelly.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
That was excellent.
Can I just also, again, thank those that have gone before, that have done the heavy lifting, on whose shoulders and their actionables I am encouraged to continue to launch an amplified youth voice from. Without them, my work wouldn't be as easy as it is today. They pioneered and carved ways. But I want to say, this isn't about room at the table.
Yeah.
Oops,
There
sorry.
needs to be standing room only.
Yeah.
So there's space for every single person.
Yeah. Excellent.
Awesome.
Thanks, ladies.
Thank you very much, Kelly.
Thanks, Kirsten. Yeah, thanks a
Thank you,
lot.
Jean.
We'll be in touch. You bet. Thank you.